Good afternoon, Adobe Education community, and welcome to the Adobe Creative Educator Show. We're excited to be here with you today for a really important conversation. There's a lot going on in the world right now that we're seeing both in the United States and across the world, and we've brought a very important guest to talk about some of these topics with you today. And if as you're watching this, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat where you're joining us from. But today what we want to explore are the different realities that are across the United States today, and especially watching social media, watching the media over the past few weeks. There are a lot of important conversations to be having with your children, with students. And as a part of that, we've welcomed Merve Lapus, who is on the show with us today from Common Sense Media, who's really going to be sharing a lot about the resources from Common Sense. And so, Merve, I'll just let you introduce yourself and your role at Common Sense.
Sure. So happy to be here with you guys today, and thank you for the space and the opportunity just to connect with your educators. My name is Merve Lapus. I'm the Vice President of Education Outreach and National Partnerships for Common Sense. My primary function is to really work closely with educators and community leaders to make sure that as we see media and technology playing a role in the lives of our kids and families, that we're doing everything we can to learn from their needs and really provide free resources, high quality resources that are turnkey, ready, and accessible for everyone to take and use. And so I kind of see that work and really appreciate the opportunity of being able to share some of what we're hearing in regards to these many different issues and situations these past couple months that are on the minds of our educators, our families, and the communities we support.
Yeah, I have to say I've known Merve for quite a long time as an educator who very early on in the early 2010s, I was really drawn to the resources at Common Sense Media. And so those of you who are watching, if you're not familiar with Common Sense Media, if you have not checked out their resources, if you have not subscribed to or texted to receive the text as a parent, the resources are phenomenal. And they've always kind of been the staple go-to resource as a parent, as an educator, for all things around media. And given this conversation now with everything that's happening in the world, what are some of the resources that Common Sense Media is sharing to help guide parents and educators at this time?
Yeah, so I mean, as we think about just kind of the many things that are compounding on the minds of educators and families, I mean, we're going from a pandemic of sickness through COVID-19 and a number of issues that then just kind of led to many communities having to shut down, schools having to just drop everything and figure things out, to families now having to figure out how to do many things all at once, and then being sheltered in place or locked away, it feels like in many ways, for many months. And then on top of that, starting to see images bombarding our social feeds and the news that are directly highlighting things like brutality, police brutality, what's happening to our communities, especially with Black lives around that. And, getting a sense of what does this all mean? What is my role? What role can I play? There's a lot of protesting that's happening, but then there's other things that are happening. What do I do to make sense of all of this? And we're finding and hearing that educators are wanting to start to address this more, but are looking for ways to address this, especially when they come back either for the summer or the fall. And we're finding that a lot of parents are trying to figure out, what is my role as a person who's not of color? Like, how do I talk about these issues with my kid? Where do I start? And that's hard. I mean, it's a hard conversation to have. And I also can't speak on behalf of every person of color because I don't represent their realities and their space. But what we can do is really provide some resources that make it a little bit easier to actually get started. So one of the things that we do as Common Sense Media is to really find high quality media that could be meaningful and could be supportive to your kids. We want to call out some of the stuff that's not so great as well. So if you go to the site, you'll find those resources there. But in regards to these particular issues and these situations, especially right now, curating high quality resources like books by Black authors and Hispanic authors and other people of color ensuring that you're able to kind of see the different perspectives that are coming from these communities, and their stories, right? And then how do you have a discussion around those things, or watching content through some of the streaming platforms that are highlighting things like McFarlane or 13 on Netflix, that all allow you to get some insight into kind of what are these systematic things that everyone's talking about, and what does that mean for the communities that are being affected for it. Starting these conversations in a way that can be more directed by the media that's already there is a place to start for a lot of families and for a lot of educators. We've got a number of resources that are out right now from just, like I mentioned earlier, there's a lot flooding, right? From social media and whatever platform you're on, depending on what you click on and depending on who you follow, you're going to be hit with a stream of information. And a lot of that information might come from different directions across this continuum, whether it's political, whether it's about trying to bait you into buying things. And they're all based on where you're clicking. So this is a digital citizenship type of thing to recognize, right? But that directly then implants the kind of content you're going to see. And right now in the news media, there's a lot of scary images that are coming out and the realities that are happening out there. How much of them are current and really tied to the current issues? How much of those things are just being brought back up for the sake of being able to exacerbate messages, right? So parents need to really kind of think about, if I've got a little one, how do I talk about these images that they might have seen? Or how do I control the amount of images that are funneling in to my household, right? These are all things you want to be cognizant of. So we've actually got an article that we put out around how to talk to kids about difficult subjects. And that subject matter can be as challenging as some of the race relations and issues that are happening right now, to things that are just, ongoing violence or things that we're seeing that are happening in other countries. You want to be mindful of where they are developmentally. You want to be mindful of your language, and you also want to check yourself, understand when might you actually be trying to do a good thing but eliciting bias because of the way you're describing things, describing people. If describing an individual and building in their size, their height, their gender, or their race has nothing to do with the conversation, then don't talk about those things. But if it's directly connected to that, call those things out with purpose and ensure that you're helping in simple terms, especially for the younger ones, recognize why that matters, why we have to talk about those things, right? But then as you age up, providing a space for your older kids to be able to share where they're at, understand their emotions, their pressures, their experiences, or maybe even their friends, and then being able to admit when you don't know something, and where do you then find opportunities to find that information together, right? And that's just with knowing that these are about to be hard discussions. Eventually, it's okay, now the discussion comes. Where do I find this stuff, right? So one of the ones, the article that you brought up there was one that we just put out recently because of the current situation. We had a lot of our families asking, how do I talk about these issues, especially when, we're a white family, but we are big advocates and we want to be able to do something, but we don't know how to talk about these realities. So we wanted to, again, simply like, how do you bring media to help you diversify your knowledge and that conversation? So from books to some insights around how do you seek the right stuff, broaden your own perspective, so your own books that you should be reading for yourself, let alone having your kids read. And then just better understanding kind of the landscape, the news media, the literacy around what platforms these are all now funneling to you on, right? And then how do you start opening those conversations? I think the one thing to recognize is you're not going to be perfect, but you need to show, if you are committed to this and committed to these conversations, that you're wanting to learn. Not because you made a mistake and it opened up this reality that, oh man, I do have bias and I've been using it. Okay, now I'm going to try to walk it back. But recognizing that bias and privilege come with, something you had nothing to do with, right? And we were born into it. And in some cases, you've earned privilege by putting yourself in situations or being given an opportunity to be in a situation. I know my own privilege as a male, right? That you two might not have because you're women, and that is not right. And so those are things we try to break down, let alone the privilege of being white or being Asian in a particular community. Those privileges exist, and recognizing that and then doing the work, that's hard. It takes a lot of time. One of the places you can start, try listening to the perspective of others. It's a place to start.
Yeah. No, thank you for sharing all of that. And I know I love Common Sense Media because it provides so many different resources just across the board. And, I think as some educators they don't know where to start. They see everything that's going on. They're hearing from students or parents have children asking questions. What would be the first step that parents or educators can take? I shared that resource, but
yeah.
Obviously, I love how you mentioned kind of that internal bias, because I think so much of, looking online, what can I do? How can I contribute to the conversation? But a lot of the times it's taking a step back and looking within yourself of where those biases lie. I thought was really powerful. But yeah, what could be the kind of the first thing that would be really actionable?
So we have this great discussion that we did on we had a live segment that I would encourage folks, families especially, but educators and anyone to watch, that was called Helping Kids Process Violence, Trauma, and Race in a World of Nonstop News. It's part of a series that we also have going on at Common Sense, but it is with actual doctors focused on this work. So they are much more well positioned to kind of talk about how to address these types of traumas and recommendations for families. So that's a great resource to start with. Again, a strong media piece that could be really helpful to kind of use as an opportunity to get conversations started. For educators, I provided you guys another link that's really focused on how to address kind of social justice and equity for equity-focused educators. And what we wanted to do here is really, there's so many great, again, resources and authors that are already there, and we just wanted to curate it all into one space. So if you're going to bring these lessons into your classroom, know that they already exist, and that it's about understanding the information that they're sharing, and then how do you bring this back. So some examples, like the Black Lives Matter at School curriculum, a deep dive through Educating for Democracy by the Teaching Channel, Civic Engagement Research Group. There's a number of these great resources, articles, and newsletters and activities that you can build right into your practice from a number of just great creators that already exist. These are going to be tough conversations to have in your classrooms. And in some cases, some educators might feel like, well, then, these aren't conversations for me to have. These are conversations for someone else. And I think as we think about just the role of, in our case, like media and technology is playing a role in everyone's life now, whether it's down to a smartphone in a household with 8 people, and it's a single smartphone, down to those families that have, TVs in every room. It plays a big role. And the information and the messages that are coming into it, we now have to all talk about these things in the classroom, at home, and in our community spaces. Well, the same is going to go for addressing these important conversations. We all have a role in addressing these issues, especially if we want to have a culture in our classrooms that is focused on really thinking critically, feeling empowered, being able to understand and collaborate in ways that are truly open and supportive of others. Like, it's going to take that. I would push everyone to kind of think about something that you can do for yourself, not to share with anyone else, just to commit to, right? And really kind of think about, what is one thing I can do that I can commit to, whether it's I'm going to read this article and I'm going to pull out one activity that I want to try with just the people closest to me first, and start in a safe space. And I say safe space with the intention of getting ready to be vulnerable, right? And it's a hard thing. It's a hard thing to be there. But there are plenty of people that are ready to be vulnerable with you. But it's about being open and being honest about wanting to do that work, right? So yeah, that is that commitment that, I would ask, if you're going to do something, start there. Not about what you're going to post, not about what you want to share with others. It's really about what you want to do for yourself to kind of do this work. And hopefully some of these pieces of media and content that we have on the site can help you kind of think about and even find information that'll be right for you and right for your family and right for the community you might support in your classrooms.
I love that the commitment really is about recognizing how you can take an active role and do the work, not so much what you can post or what you can share, but more about what can you do, looking internally, doing the hard work, and really recognizing and then putting something that you recognize into action. And I think that's what's really needed. At least the way I look at it is, what are the things that we can do, right? And especially with my children, how can I have them recognize that it's not enough just to put something on social media. I have a 12-year-old daughter who's really well-intentioned and wants to put, she wants to post something. And I said, that's great. I want you to support, but what does that mean? Why is it happening? And what actionable steps can we take so that it's not just we're posting something, but there's something that's really well-intentioned that we're going to do afterwards to support the communities that are in pain and to understand why. And that was actually a conversation I was having with her just this morning, because so many, there's so many well-intentioned posts out there, but what do they really mean?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there is, this is something that we noted in one of our lessons before, is like there's activism and there's slacktivism, right? This idea of like, oh yeah, I'm for it, I'm posting, I'm doing this. And it's not saying that you have to go out there and actually be on the ground. I mean, if you can be out there physically and, like I've got family that's immunocompromised. So as much as like I want to be out there and being able to share that, I've done it in different ways to date, but other ways that I can do it is my commitment to bringing these diverse experiences, opportunities, and voices into the hands of others, right? And giving them the space to be able to do that research and work. And it's not, oftentimes so it feels like, oh, let me go ask all of my friends that are going through this and see what I can do. And like they're already going through so much. So do some of the work first and then be able to come back and say, hey, like I'm trying, I want to know what's actually going to be helpful, and oftentimes it's just being able to do something, sharing and showing your support is great, but are you a slacktivist or an activist? Like you're doing something tangible that actually is going to move that dial. And that's an important thing if we're going to expect to see some of these issues that have been coming up actually kind of addressed.
Yeah. No, that's so powerful. And I think it's starting with the younger generation and having these conversations. And I love that it's not about any brand or any social media post. It's like this challenge. What is your commitment to recognize the challenges that might exist in the communities that support you? Those who are watching, just take some time to write that down on a piece of paper, like really think about it for yourself, and hopefully that can continue to engage some of the conversations that you're having with students and your own children.
Yeah, and again, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of great content that's being shared on these platforms that are directly in support, that are helping others to better understand what this means, what they can be doing, where they can invest their time, their money, their policies, right? And that is just as important. So it's like it's an ongoing balance wheel. We are in a space right now. Things are starting to reopen, but we are in a space where we are going to be flooded with these messages. And it's not just the fact that we're spending all this time; it's the quality and the effectiveness of what you're watching or what you're engaging with. That's just as important. So as a parent, as an educator, as a user of these tools, like, I need to think critically about the messages I'm allowing in, the time I'm pushing it away, and then the experience that my kids might be having based on my own emotions, where I come back, into now my space with my family. Like, what is that message they're receiving? They will feed off of that, and so, it's complex. It sounds hard. It is hard.
Yeah.
There's no sugarcoating that, right? But if you're committed, then you work through it and you try to find the dials that you can turn.
Yeah. Well, Merve, I mean, this kind of leads to like, we were talking a lot about, our kids are definitely engaged in so much media and so many media messages. And I know you have children, I have children, we've had these conversations about like, we work and we're now. And so that just opens up a whole other can of worms, because now our children are home for the summer. Over here I'm in South Florida, I'm in the South. So we actually just finished up school yesterday. Yesterday was the last day for my kids, and there's no camp. They'll go to camp. There's no camp. it rains most of the day in South Florida. It's like the summer is rainy season. So I know I'm probably not alone in the fact that like now more than ever, my kids are online more than they've ever been, ever. Which, you know, there's again, all the media messages, but then on top of that, like dealing with screen time and then dealing with like, what am I going to do with them? And I know Common Sense has done such a great job at curating and kind of like thinking through this question. This is clearly not just one that I have. So would you have any resources that maybe you've come across that you'd love to share with other parents like myself?
Yeah, sure.
And educators that maybe can provide some resources to parents as they leave the school year that you guys have compiled, because that would be so helpful, like really helpful for me. So I can imagine really helpful for others.
For sure. So a couple different places to kind of think about. So one, based on the conversations we were having today around these topics, like, these are important things that we might want to address this summer. But then we also have the academic slide, the summer slide, and what was the COVID slide leading up to this. And there's a lot of fear around it. What do we just do? Because camps are out. I'm still working. Like, what can we do to keep our kids engaged with things that are, effective, especially with that more, exposure to screen time. So we Common Sense, with a number of partners, put together wideopenschool.org. And that is a free resource and website where we put all the work that we do with Common Sense into a single place, a single portal for families and educators to find ways to engage our kids through learning, whether it's academic, like traditional academic work, through social studies, where you'll find a lot of the resources that I was mentioning earlier around social justice and social studies and history that you can use as media to talk about some of these current issues. But then looking at things like English language arts and math and STEM, to social emotional learning, to understanding what are some of the learning needs. If I've got a kid that has special learning needs, what are some of those particular resources I can use for them while I'm now at home during the summer? And then how can I set that up, and wanting to make sure that these are all free to access. So this is all free for folks to be able to access, and they just click in if they're a family or an educator and address the grade level that they're interested in. And then it'll serve up information in little collections specific to the things that they're interested in. And then you could also go through a daily schedule. Like right now, my kids are going through a daily schedule. You just click in there, click daily schedule, click their age range, and now they've got a whole day of things that they can engage with. And a lot of these things are offline too, because so many families don't have the same kind of access.
Yeah.
So if you can get on for a moment to be able to find what you need, you can then take those things offline and be able to do them at home with the tools that you might have as manipulatives potentially. The other place you can go is our text platform. So Tanya, you mentioned earlier kind of our text platform. It's called Tech Balance. And if you text either kids or familia to 2155, you'll be entered in to receive text messages from us weekly that gives you insights into things to be considering in regards to technology in your life and the way that you support your kids and their use of media and technology. So when you text 21555, if you text kids, it comes to you in English. If you text familia, it comes to you in Spanish.
Do it. I have to tell you, I'm not just saying that because Merve is on. I actually had told you before. I did it a while back. And what the stuff that comes is actually extremely useful. It's not overkill. Like they don't take advantage of sending too many messages. It's really thoughtfully curated with small, timely messages that actually are super useful. It is definitely worth doing. Okay, it's my little.
Thank you for that.
Well, I'm a parent who did it, and I was really happy I did, because sometimes you do this and you get things you're like, ugh, like one. But no, the messages are good, and they'll send an image. Like it's not. It's very well done.
Yeah, I love how it's accessible too. Like you have these components that are offline, so really taking that into consideration. Then it's if it's an SMS, like being able to reach so many educators and parents, obviously. So yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, of course.
Oh my God, and Merve, I'm on your wide open school right now for daily schedule, and I'm in heaven. I didn't even think, so I am so happy.
Summer.
Like every parent needs this. This is awesome. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Well, if you really want to get into things, you can go to the Watch now and see all the live things that are happening right now. Like you can follow or chat directly with an explorer with National Geographic who's going to talk about when they went down into this cave that one time, and or the great museums that have opened up their virtual doors for folks to kind of go and do tours and do guided experiences. Like that's all there, all in one place.
Oh my God, this is so cool. Hey, you have Draw with Drew. That's also with us. That's awesome. That's so awesome. Oh my God, I'm so excited. Thank you. This just like made me feel so much better. I'm so excited to dive into this.
Awesome. Well, I am so happy to be able to share these resources. Like I said, it's at a tumultuous time right now, and a lot of things are coming into exposure. And I think, depending on kind of where you're at with the layers of things that are just falling into place right now, there's opportunity for really educating ourselves to help drive the change that we need, whether it is to think about our own emotional wellness and making sure that we're keeping safe and being sure to connect with people, to recognizing some of the situations that our own communities are going through and how can we be there, not just in solidarity, but be there actively. And then how do we bring those into the classroom with our youngest learners who are going to be there, the ones to really kind of shape and frame and change this world. So let's empower them now with a voice that they obviously already have, and recognize how they do so in a way that is constructive and supportive on these platforms that are available to them. Because, digital citizenship is still core to my heart. So, as I think about this, like, it's great, it's opportunity, but, we really do want to think about the way that we put that information. So thank you guys for your time to have this discussion.
Thank you so much, Merve. And on that optimistic note, really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today and share all these amazing resources for Common Sense Media. And for those who are watching this stream, be sure to check out commonsense.org and some of the other resources we'll share out with this recording. But thank you again, Merve. So we can't give hugs, so we're always giving our virtual hugs. And we'll see you all, Adobe community, next week on our live stream show. So thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for watching. Click the link in the description below to explore more free online professional development, and click the link on screen to subscribe to the channel for more videos.